The fifth time. James Cameron stood on the deck of his research vessel in the Pacific, watching the sun set over the water. 71 years old, 5 marriages, 4 divorces, and finally, he thought he understood what love actually meant. His phone buzzed. A text from Susie, his fifth wife. "Dinner's ready when you get back. Made your favorite, love you." 25 years together. 25 years of actually getting it right. He typed back, "Be there in 20, love you too." It had taken him 4 failed marriages and most of his adult life to learn something that should have been simple. Love wasn't about finding someone who fit into your life. It was about building a life together, one compromise and conversation at a time. But getting there, that had been a journey. Marriage 1, Sharon, 1978-1984. He was 24 years old, driving a truck and making short films in his spare time. Sharon Williams was pretty, sweet, supportive. They got married because that's what you did at 24 in the late 70s when you were serious about someone. "I'm going to make movies," Jim told her on their wedding night. "Real movies, not industrial training films, real cinema." "I know you will," Sharon said, because she believed in him. The problem was, Jim believed in movies more than he believed in anything else. Their apartment in Orange County was small, cluttered with camera equipment and storyboards. Jim worked 12, 14, 16 hours a day, first at the truck driving job, then at Roger Corman's studio building miniatures and doing special effects. "You coming to bed?" Sharon would ask at 2 a.m., finding him at the kitchen table sketching out robot designs. "Soon, just need to finish this." Soon turned into 3 hours. 3 hours turned into falling asleep at the table. Falling asleep at the table turned into Sharon waking up alone most mornings. "Jim, we never spend time together anymore," she said one Saturday when he was supposed to take her to the beach, but instead was working on models for a low-budget sci-fi film. "This is important, Shar. This is my career." "What about our marriage? Isn't that important?" He looked up at her, genuinely confused. "Of course it is, but you knew this about me when we got married. You knew I was ambitious. I thought you'd make time for both." "I am making time. We're talking right now, aren't it?" But they weren't talking. He was half listening while gluing together miniature spaceships, his mind already on the next shot, the next project, the next step up the ladder. When Sharon asked for a divorce 6 years later, Jim was surprised. Not devastated, surprised. As if he'd forgotten he was married at all. "I love you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I can't compete with your dreams, and I don't think you even notice I'm trying." She was right. He'd been so focused on becoming someone, he'd forgotten to be someone to her. The divorce was quick, amicable. They hugged goodbye like old friends who'd lost touch. Jim went straight back to work. He had a script to finish, something about a cyborg from the future. Marriage 2, Gale Anne Hurd, 1985-1989. Gale Anne Hurd was different. She was a producer, Roger Corman's protege, smart as hell and just as ambitious as Jim. They met on the set of a low-budget film, bonded over their shared frustration with the limitations of low-budget filmmaking, and fell into a partnership that was part creative, part romantic, part business arrangement. "We should make a movie together," Gale said one night over drinks. "A real one, something that matters." "I've got a script," Jim said. "The Terminator it's about. A killer robot from the future. I know. You've told me 6 times, let's do it." They got married in 1985, right as production was ramping up. It made sense. They were partners in every way that mattered. Why not make it official? The Terminator was a hit. Suddenly Jim wasn't a nobody working for Roger Corman. He was a director, a real one. And Gale was his producer, his wife, his closest collaborator. They should have been perfect together. The problem was they were too similar. Both alphas, both certain they knew the right way to do things, both unwilling to compromise. "The next film should be Aliens," Gale said. "Fox wants a sequel, and you're the perfect person to direct it." "I want to do The Abyss first," Jim countered. "Something original, something about the ocean." "Aliens is the smart business move." "I don't care about the smart business move. I care about making art." "Art doesn't pay the bills, Jim." "The Terminator was art, and it paid plenty." They fought about everything. Creative decisions, business decisions, whose name went first in the credits. Every discussion became a negotiation. Every negotiation became a battle. On set, they were electric, pushing each other to be better, challenging each other's ideas, creating something neither could have made alone. At home, they were exhausted, too tired to fight, too stubborn to give in. "I think we work better as collaborators than as spouses," Gale said one evening, 3 years in. Jim knew she was right. "So what do? We finish Aliens. We make the best goddamn sequel ever made, and then we figure out the rest." They did finish Aliens. It was brilliant. And then they got divorced. Like with Sharon, it was amicable, professional even. They shook hands like business partners ending a contract. Jim threw himself into The Abyss, the underwater film he'd been dreaming about. No wife to consult, no partner to fight with, just him and his vision. It was lonely. Marriage 3. Kathryn Bigelow, 1989-1991. Kathryn Bigelow was a director too. Brilliant, visionary, completely unlike anyone Jim had ever met. Tall, gorgeous, with an MFA from Columbia and a mind that worked in ways that fascinated him. They met at a screening, started talking about lens choices and camera angles, and didn't stop for 6 hours. "You should direct action films," Jim told her. "You've got the eye for it." "I'm making whatever interests me," Kathryn said. "I don't fit into boxes." God, he loved that about her. They got married in 1989, right as Jim was developing Terminator 2. It was a whirlwind, passion, intensity, two creative minds colliding in the best possible way. For about a year. Then Jim realized that Kathryn didn't want to be his muse or his partner or his anything except his equal. She had her own projects, her own vision, her own career that had nothing to do with him. "Come to the set today," Jim would say. "I want to show you this shot I'm planning." "Can't, I'm in prep for Point Break." "Can it wait?" "Can Terminator 2 wait?" He knew she was right, but part of him wanted her to choose him anyway, to make his work the priority, the way he'd made his work the priority in every relationship. "You're not really here," Kathryn said to him one night after they'd spent dinner in silence, both mentally on their respective sets. "Neither are you," Jim replied. "I know, that's the problem. We're both married to our work. There's no room for each other." They split in 1991, barely 2 years in. It was the shortest of his marriages, the least acrimonious and somehow the saddest. They'd liked each other, respected each other. They just couldn't figure out how to exist in the same space. Jim went back to Terminator 2, which became the biggest hit of his career. And he told himself he was fine alone. Marriage 4. Linda Hamilton, 1997-1999. Linda Hamilton was Sarah Connor. Tough, fierce, complicated. They'd worked together on the Terminator, reconnected on Terminator 2, and finally fell into something that felt like love on the set of T2. "You're different than the others," Linda told him. "You actually see me, not just as an actress or a collaborator, as a person." "You're easy to see," Jim said, and meant it. They had a daughter together, Josephine, before they got married. When they finally tied the knot in 1997, it felt inevitable. They'd been orbiting each other for years. Time to make it official. But Jim was working on Titanic, the biggest, most ambitious film he'd ever attempted. The budget was spiraling. The studio was panicking. The shoot was a nightmare. And he was never home. Josephine asked when Daddy's coming back. Linda said over the phone from LA while Jim was in Mexico, filming in the massive water tank they'd built. Soon, Jim said automatically. Just a few more weeks. You said that a month ago. The ship keeps sinking wrong. We need to get it right. Your daughter needs you to get parenting right. It was a fair point, but Jim was drowning, literally and figuratively, in Titanic. The film was consuming everything. His time, his energy, his sanity. I can't do this, Linda said when he came home for a brief visit, exhausted and irritable. I can't be married to a man who's never here, who's never really present even when he is here. I'm doing this for us, Jim argued. This film is going to change everything. It already has. It's changed you. You're so obsessed with getting every detail perfect that you can't see what you're losing. I'm not losing anything. You're losing your family, Jim. You're losing me. He stared at her, this woman he'd known for over a decade, this mother of his child, and he couldn't think of a single thing to say that would make her stay. Because she was right. He was choosing Titanic over her, over their daughter, over everything that wasn't the work. They separated in 1999, right as Titanic was breaking every box office record in history. Jim stood on stage at the Oscars shouting, "I'm the king of the world," while his marriage disintegrated. He'd won 11 Academy Awards and lost the woman he loved. We loved each other, Linda said years later when a journalist asked about the divorce. We just didn't get along. Jim's a brilliant director and a terrible husband. Jim couldn't even argue, it was true. 7 years together, a daughter they both adored, and still it hadn't been enough. The problem, Jim was starting to realize, wasn't the women he chose. It was him. Interlude, the common denominator. After Linda, Jim took a break. No dating, no relationships, just work. He threw himself into developing Avatar, a film he'd been dreaming about for years. But something had shifted. Maybe it was turning 50. Maybe it was losing Linda. Maybe it was watching his daughter grow up in 2 separate houses instead of one. For the first time in his life, Jim looked at his pattern honestly. 4 marriages, 4 divorces, different women, different circumstances, same result. What's the common factor? His therapist asked. Yes, he'd finally agreed to see a therapist. Gale had suggested it years ago. He'd refused, pride, he supposed. Me, Jim said quietly. And what have you learned about you? Jim thought about it. About Sharon, who'd loved him but couldn't compete with his ambition. About Gale, who'd matched his ambition but couldn't live with it. About Kathryn, who'd had her own ambition and no room for his. About Linda, who'd wanted a partner and gotten an absentee workaholic. I've been trying to have relationships on my terms, Jim said slowly. As long as it works for me, I'm in. The second it requires real sacrifice, real compromise, I check out. Not physically always, but mentally, emotionally. And how's that working for you? Jim laughed bitterly. I'm 50 years old, 4 times divorced, and eating takeout alone in a house the size of a small hotel. You tell me. What would different look like? Jim didn't know, but he was starting to think he wanted to find out. Marriage 5, SUZYAMIS, 2000 present. Susie Amis had played Lizzie Calvert's granddaughter in Titanic. Jim barely remembered her from the set. She'd had a small role, had been professional and pleasant, and that was it. They reconnected at an environmental fundraiser in 2000. Jim was there because he'd become obsessed with ocean conservation after spending so much time underwater. Susie was there because she'd left acting and was starting a school focused on environmental education. You're the Titanic guy, Susie said, shaking his hand. And you're the woman who had the misfortune of being in Titanic, Jim replied. She laughed. It wasn't that bad, though I did spend most of my scenes freezing in that lifeboat. Sorry about that. You should be. My toes have never been the same. They started talking. About the ocean, about conservation, about education. Susie was smart, passionate, completely unimpressed by his Hollywood success. "What are you working on now?" she asked. "A film about blue aliens on another planet." Sounds weird. It is weird, but it's about environmentalism, about indigenous cultures, about. Sounds preachy. Jim stopped mid-sentence. "Excuse me." Most environmental films are preachy. They lecture instead of telling a story. Are you going to lecture or tell a story? No one talked to him like that. Directors didn't get challenged, not when they just won 11 Oscars. He loved it. "I'm going to tell a story," he said, "and then sneak the environmentalism in so people don't notice until it's too late." "Good, let me know when it comes out. I'll take my students." They dated for 7 months before getting married. Not a whirlwind this time. Deliberate, careful, both of them older and hopefully wiser. On their wedding night, Jim said, "I need to tell you something. I'm not good at this. Marriage, I mean. I have a terrible track record." "I know, I Googled you. And you're still here." "I'm still here, but Jim, this time is going to be different." "How do you know?" "Because this time, you know what you're doing wrong. That means you can do something about it." The first year was hard. Jim was used to being in charge, used to having his way, used to prioritizing work above everything. "I need to go back to New Zealand for reshoots," he told Susie 3 months in. "For how long?" "2 weeks, maybe 3. We're supposed to go to that gala for my school." "Can you reschedule?" Susie looked at him carefully. "Jim, I'm asking you to choose, the gala or New Zealand." The old Jim would have said New Zealand without hesitation. Work came first, always. But Susie was watching him with those clear eyes, and he could feel this marriage balanced on a knife's edge. "The gala," he said. "I'll send my DP to handle the reshoots." "You sure?" "No, but I'm choosing anyway." It was a small thing, one gala, but it taught Jim something. Choosing your partner didn't mean abandoning your dreams. It meant making room for theirs too. Susie's school became his school. Her passion for environmental education became his passion. He started producing documentaries about climate change, about ocean conservation, about sustainable living. And Susie, she asked about Avatar, offered feedback, celebrated his successes. But she also had her own life, her own work, her own identity completely separate from being James Cameron's wife. "I'm not your muse," she told him once. "I'm not your assistant or your producer or your project. I'm your partner, equal, separate but equal." "I know." "Do you? Because sometimes you forget. Sometimes you slip back into thinking your work is more important than mine." She was right, he did forget. Old habits, old patterns. "How do I fix that?" he asked. "By catching yourself when you do it. By actively choosing to make me happy, not your version of what should make me happy." It took years to really learn that lesson. Years of therapy, of fights, of hard conversations. Years of Jim catching himself mid-sentence and realizing he was about to prioritize his needs over hers. Years of actively choosing differently. "Marriage is a learned art," he told an interviewer once, 20 years in. "And I'm a slow learner. Took me 4 tries to figure out I was the problem." "What changed?" the interviewer asked. "I stopped looking for someone who could handle my intensity and started learning to be less intense. I stopped expecting my partner to mold themselves around my life and started building a life that had room for both of us. And I stopped thinking love was about finding the right person and started understanding it's about being the right person." That's very philosophical for a guy who makes movies about robots and blue aliens. Jim laughed. "Yeah, well, even robots can learn." 25 years later, Jim walked into the house after his day on the research vessel. The smell of dinner hit him, something with garlic and tomatoes, his favorite. Susie was in the kitchen, reading on her tablet while the sauce simmered. "Good day," she asked, looking up. "Found some interesting coral formations. Might use them for Avatar 4. Still making those. Until I die, probably." She smiled. "Come taste this, tell me if it needs salt." He tasted the sauce. "Perfect." "Liar, you always say it's perfect." "Because it is, because you made it. Now you're just being schmaltzy." He kissed her forehead. 25 years and you still call me out on my bullshit. That's true love." After dinner, they walked on the beach near their Malibu house, bare feet in the sand, the Pacific stretching out endlessly. "Do you ever regret them?" Susie asked. "The other marriages?" "I regret hurting people," Jim said. "I regret being a bad partner. But no, I don't regret the relationships. They taught me things I needed to learn." "Like what?" "Like you can't love someone halfway. Like work is important, but it's not everything. Like marriage isn't about winning or being right. It's about showing up, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "Look at you, being wise in your old age." "I'm 71. I'm entitled to a little wisdom." They walked in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from decades together. The kind Jim had never managed with anyone else. "Hey, Susie." "Yeah." "Thank you." "For what?" "For being patient while I figured my shit out. For not giving up when I was still learning. For being my fifth and final marriage." She squeezed his hand. "You're welcome, but Jim, you're still learning. We both are. That's what makes it work." She was right. Even now, 25 years in, there were days when he caught himself slipping into old patterns. Days when he prioritized his work or his vision or his way of doing things. But now he caught himself, and he chose differently. That was the art of it, not being perfect, just being willing to learn. Epilogue. Years later, a young filmmaker interviewed Jim for a documentary about his career. "5 marriages," the filmmaker said. "That's unusual in Hollywood even." "It is," Jim agreed. "I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. Each marriage taught me something." What would you tell your younger self, the guy marrying Sharon at 24? Jim thought about it. "I'd tell him that love isn't something you do when it's convenient. It's not something that fits around your other priorities. It's not a project you can optimize or a problem you can solve with the right equation." "What is it then?" "It's showing up, it's listening. It's actively wanting to make your partner happy, not your version of what should make them happy, but what actually makes them happy. It's being willing to be wrong. It's choosing them over and over, even when choosing your work would be easier." "And you learned all that?" "Eventually. Took me 4 divorces and a hell of a lot of therapy. But yeah, eventually." "Was it worth it?" Jim thought about Susie, waiting for him at home. About their life together, messy and real and good. About finally understanding what love actually meant. "Yeah," he said, "it was worth it." The young filmmaker packed up his equipment. At the door, he paused. "Mr. Cameron, I just got engaged. Any advice?" Jim smiled. "Don't make her compete with your work. Don't assume she'll wait while you figure yourself out. And when she tells you something's wrong, believe her the first time. It took me 4 marriages to learn that. You can learn it now." "I will." "Good, then you'll do better than I did." After the filmmaker left, Jim called Susie. "How'd the interview go?" she asked. "Fine. Talked about my spectacular failures at marriage." "Your favorite topic?" "Second favorite. You're my favorite." "Schmaltzy again." "Can't help it. I'm old and in love." She laughed, and the sound made him smile. "See you at home," she said. "Wouldn't miss it." And he meant it. Because that was the thing he'd finally learned. 4 marriages and 50 years too late. Home wasn't a place. It was a person you chose. Every single day. no matter what.